Hello and welcome to Crann's very first podcast. My name is Orla Healy and I'm the brand and content specialist here at Crann. And today I'm joined by Kate Jarvie, who has the honour of being our podcast's first interviewee. Welcome, Kate.
Oh, wow. It is a big honour. I'm thrilled. I hope I get it right.
Oh, I'm sure you will. For those of us who don't know you, tell us a bit about yourself and your relationship to the Crann Centre.
Okay, well, I'm a lifelong philanthropist. I'm an American by birth, but I've taken an Irish passport, so I'm fully Irish now. I've lived in Ireland since 1997, and I pursued quite a few philanthropic projects in Ireland prior to the Crann Centre. But about 2012, 2013, it came to my attention through personal contacts that those with disability in Ireland were very poorly served. And that got my philanthropic attention. And in a way, that's the beginning of Crann.
Brilliant. And so that was essentially the catalyst behind the organisation. And you talked to people with disabilities being poorly served. What did you feel was the need, the gap that Crann could fill for these people?
Well, I think what was really important to me always, in all the projects I've done, but certainly, most especially with Crann, is to listen to the voice of the client, the service user. And so that's what we did right away. I asked Cork Spina Bifida and Kerry Spina Bifida if they would be gracious enough to let me sit in on some of their meetings and just listen. There's great power in listening, and when I listened and I heard what their needs were, I was overwhelmed by the fact that there was such a dearth of services in every category. So we did a survey then, a professional survey, which again encapsulated the voice of the service user. And the number one priority, which I thought was going to be clinical, but wasn't, the number one priority was social isolation. And I guess the day that we opened the report and read that first sentence, Crann was born.
Brilliant. So like research is obviously has a big role to play in how Crann offers its services and the feedback, taking feedback into account. What how would you describe the 2-gen approach? Because I know that was it's initial stages in terms of how it's used in Europe and in disability. So could you tell us a little bit more about the 2-gen approach, what that means, and I suppose how you came across it as well?
Well, it was my eureka moment, absolute eureka moment, but I'll backtrack a bit. So having done our professional needs assessment survey, which showed that the three big ones were social isolation, fragmented care, and just a simple lack of service provision, particularly incontinence and self-management. So we knew what the needs were. Then we had to think about how are we going to serve those needs. I was in America working on another philanthropic project when I came across the 2-gen model. So the 2-gen model had been used in the United States then for about 8 years, but now for over 10, to serve people with intergenerational poverty. And the minute I saw the model graphed out, with the family at the centre and the needs addressed through the family, I thought, oh yes, if this works for intergenerational poverty, this works for disability. So then I asked the Aspen Institute, which is one of the largest philanthropic think tanks in the world, I had the audacity to ask them if they would allow me to, with their mentoring, adapt the 2-gen model for disability. And I think they were so shocked by my audacity that they said yes.
Amazing, because I know from being behind the scenes a small bit that you've had the opportunity to talk to in front of the Oireachtas with the Aspen Institute about the 2-gen approach. How, in practical terms, how does that affect the approach we take to services and programmes here at Crann?
Well, it was obvious to me when I first met the 2-gen model that this was a better way to serve people, because it recognizes where people are at the coalface of their needs. Instead of us assessing what we think they might need, we take the family as a unit and support them and say, what is it that you need as a family? in addition to your person with disability, whom we know probably has complex care needs, what does this family need to stop living in the margins of society and be reinserted into the mainstream of society? So that's the real thrust of it, is about bringing families back from the margins where they live into the mainstream, where we can all share the gifts that we have.
Amazing. And in terms of, I suppose, the practicalities of setting up a charity, a service-based charity from the ground up, there has to obviously been a lot. There has to have been a lot of practical considerations you needed to take into consideration. The building that we're sitting in right this moment is a gorgeous grey stone, 2-story, 3 stories to the Americans building. It's gone through lots of changes and retrofitting to get to what it is now. What was that journey like, identifying a building that was suitable and retrofitting it? What were the key needs that you needed the building to fulfill?
Yeah, so the building was crucial to how we were going to deliver the services. Once we knew what the needs were, then we adopted the 2-gen model. Then we needed a purpose-built building to serve and to put the 2-gen model to work for our families. And we went to Switzerland with a small research team, the original steering committee for Crann, some of whom are still board members. We did a project visit to the Knotville Centre in Switzerland, which is probably the best paraplegic and spinal service centre in the world. And boy, did we get an eye-opener. But they told us a lot of important things about the building. Number one is geography. Needs to be really accessible. So that was a prime consideration. And also that it was community-based. Really important that it lives and thrives and works in the community. So we came back to Ireland and we started to look. And we found this building, which was semi-derelict at the time, but we knew it was a good building because it was John Woods, who were a very prominent building contractors here in Ireland. It was their headquarters. So we knew the building was sound. Hadn't been used for 3 years, but the geography was perfect. Good road access, good airport access. And it was based in a burgeoning community, which is Ballincollig. So the other thing that was so important about the building, apart from the geography and the community base, was the fact that it was going to give us the opportunity to provide a non-clinical environment. Going back to the original assessment, where we listened to our cohort, they wanted a non-clinical building. So when they came through the door, they thought, okay, here's a place where we can go on a journey that's going to take us to a better place together as a family. It's not a clinical, we're not here for a doctor's appointment, a clinical assessment.
That's a really, it's a really sweet approach to come to, that you don't want to feel on the back foot when you come to, and I'm biased here, having worked in the building for, a couple of years now. People say to us, if you could bottle the feeling that you get when you come into Crann, we wouldn't need a fundraising team here. Yeah. So things have changed obviously quite a bit over since its inception. From the even just floor plan layout have changed, but I suppose some of the biggest changes have been outside of the building. The playground, which was opened last summer, and conservation at Crann, which is in Kanturk, just outside Kanturk. What were the priorities for these external environments? Like obviously there's people, especially wheelchair users or people who are using mobility aids, have different levels of experience with the outdoors. What was important for you in terms of what went into these spaces?
I think, first and foremost, obviously it's about inclusivity. But, if I can just be philosophical for a second, equanimity is the jewel in the crown of humanity. And unless we provide inclusive environments for people to work, rest and play, We deny ourselves that equanimity. The world has radical problems and needs help. The great news is we can provide radical change. And that's what these spaces do. They provide the kind of radical change-making environment where we let go of stigma. We play together, we enjoy conservation together, or in the hub, we work together. And stigma is gone. And that's the one we need to beat. Because until we let that go, equanimity and a fairer world and a fairer society can't come into being.
And is that some of the logic behind the research that we undertake here? Because I understand we do quite a bit of surveying and feedback mining from our clients that come here. Does that feed into to an ultimate goal in terms of systems change, or are you happy for Crann to be the sole the sole charity behind this 2-gen or championing this 2-gen approach, or is this something you'd like to see adopted?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works on 3 levels. First and foremost, it's really important that we serve people really well and bring value to their lives of the whole family. But secondly, it's important that we provide a template to say, look, here is a better way to serve people. It works better, it's more economical. And the third piece is, here's the research behind it. We're not just saying it, we can prove it. So it's really important that we can go out into the world and say, look, 2-gen for disability, it's a great way to serve people. It will save governments and larger service providers money, but the most important thing is it brings real value to lives, and we can prove it.
So proof of concept was is really big in terms of getting the 2-gen approach. But more recently, we published the initial part of the SROI report. And I think it was the health and continence supports, the psychological well-being supports, and the social capital supports, I believe, were the initial, the remit of the SROI report initially. But I understand some revelations came to light during this process that made you reconsider not necessarily priorities, but the importance that our clients were putting on services. Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Mm-hmm. So the social return on investment piece, the SROI, is a huge piece of our proof of concept. And the first report came back and it was revelationary. So we asked the families how they would value the services. And that was really interesting by program, but was much more interesting, and what we learned so much from is that the most important thing that Crann does is from the time you come through the door, we say, we're on the journey with you. That they placed the greatest value on that piece, which is not a program. We were so dumbstruck. We were convinced it was going to be continence, or maybe it was going to be mobility. It isn't any of those things. It's about saying, okay, we recognize that you're on a journey that's presenting you with a lot of challenges, and we are on that journey with you. We recognize the challenges, can't solve them all, but we are on the journey.
And was this something that people considered novel, or what kind of response were people giving in those feedbacks? I
think the reason it was so important to them is because they'd never encountered it before. No one had ever gone out of their way to say, look, we recognize your voice here is a huge part of what we do. What you say will be respected. Your journey, the challenges you faced will be respected. And I think that piece alone, dignifying someone's story with respect and listening, professional, empathetic listening, is the piece that we didn't value enough ourselves as the Crann team. It's what our cohort value the most.
That's really lovely to hear from someone who, I work with members of the services team and I know them personally as really kind, empathetic people. So it's really lovely to hear that comes through in terms of the services that they're being that they're doing. People are coming in for mobility or training skills on wheels or continence, and while they're all valuable skills and services and clinics for people to attend and to improve their own goals, because I know in Crann it's all about what your personal goals are, what your family's goals are. It's nice that the empathetic element, the stuff that you can't quite quantify very easily, comes across. So that's really lovely to hear. This might seem like a very broad and potentially difficult question, but what do you see as the biggest success of Crann to date?
Oh, that is a big question. Okay. I think the biggest success so far is the value we've brought to lives. That's hugely important to me. And as I often say, when we hear laughter in the playground or in the conservation area, it's made it all worth it. All the work, the challenges that we faced as the Crann team in the face of COVID and everything else, the laughter, the sharing, the happier families, that's made it all worth it. But the most important thing we've done is be a change maker. We are here not as a disruptor. There's a difference between a disruptor and a change maker. We are here as change makers to say, there's a better way to serve these families. We can do this together. We can do it in the community. We can do it better, and we can prove it.
I suppose I'm going to follow up with a second, possibly difficult, but hopefully not too difficult question. But what do you see as the future for Crann, the 2-gen approach, in the near and distant future, I suppose?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing is to get to proof of concept, so that we have a sufficient platform of information, data and information and research that we can prove the model of care. That's really important to me, because once we have proved the model of care, we are really hoping that people will copy us. You know, they say the greatest compliment is to be imitated, and once we reach proof of concept, we would certainly love to see the Crann project copied and replicated. That would be fantastic.
Amazing. Thank you, Kate. I hope you enjoyed being our first interviewee. You certainly made my job very easy. So yeah, thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you all soon.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.